Well, they did it. The squad devs have finally admitted that their code sucks. OWI Patrick, who is leading the studio's optimization and performance team, has officially stated that it doesn't matter if the game is in UE4 or UE5, the engine itself isn't necessarily a problem, it's our code. And I'm going to say something that might surprise you here, but this is the type of upfront, no BS discussion I love to see when it comes to game development. Squad just released a brand new dev blog titled The Journey to UE5 #1, and it's apparently going to be an ongoing series interviewing various developers on the good and the bad on the game's transition from UE4 to 5, but I'm not exaggerating when I say this. This is probably the best piece of media that the squad devs have put out in over a year. There's no PR language, there's no navigating around questions or giving non-answers. The devs go into extremely detailed explanations on Unreal Engine 5, how they're utilizing the engine to fix optimization and improve performance, what new features they're adding, and which ones they might not be adding, and much, much more. So let's get into it. First off, I'm going to read the foreword by the project lead, Howitzer, word for word, since I really think this sets a great tone for the blog itself. He starts off by saying, "Hi all, I wanted to put a short forward in this dev blog to talk about what we are hoping to accomplish with the Unreal Engine 5 migration. We want this transition to help secure the game's sustainability far into the future. As Epic updates its engine, new advanced features become available that we want to be capable of using. The closer we are to the latest engine version, the easier it will be for us to use new tech, should we need it. One of the biggest challenges so far with our UE5 migration has been the new physics engine. It's a huge programming effort, with design needing to set up all our vehicles again, mostly individually. We are also implementing new sound tech, so all our weapon audio is being set up and retested currently. It's all very exciting, but time-consuming work. This is going to set us up for the future, giving us a new foundation, if you will, for the future of Squad to take off from. A foundation that has been years in the making. And with that setting the stage, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this dev blog. It starts off with a short discussion on why Al-Basrah was picked for UE5 first. And since Al-Basrah Invasion is the quintessential Squad game experience, I think this was a great decision. But in this initial chat, they also show off Al-Basrah Airport's new air traffic control tower. This looks absolutely stunning, but that's not it. In a video later on in the blog, which we'll go into the whole video soon, we can actually see a sneak peek of just how big this map is with the mini-map. When you compare this to Al-Basrah now, it's night and day. There's a whole new area to the northwest of the airport. The airport itself has been massively redesigned, and they've even added a new supporting hangar or industrial zone right next to it. Al-Khora has been completely reworked. The entire eastern side of the river is not just a playable area, but it's also been completely redesigned. And the old Insurgent Main in the southeast corner of the map has been expanded a few hundred meters south. This is frankly remarkable at how much work has been done on this map. It is going to play completely different but the same, and I just cannot wait to see it in real games of Squad. But this is where the concern is for many people, and I'm pretty sure there's many of y'all right now that are saying, "Moi, that looks cool, but I don't have a NASA computer. How's this going to run? Will my computer catch fire and burn to the ground just starting the main menu now?" All of this cool UE5 work does absolutely nothing if Squad becomes unplayable. So what are the devs going to do to address that? OWI Patrick, who's in charge of the optimization and performance team for UE5, had an incredibly in-depth discussion about this, and he begins by saying that we've known that Squad has had some performance issues, and in the past we've just had to patch things in place due to time constraints and different feature priorities. This has led over time to things being done in non-optimal ways. This is commonly known as tech debt. The first thing my team did was to have an Unreal Insights profile taken on our minimum spec machine, and my team went over that for about 2 weeks, documenting all the issues we found and what was costly. Once we had that list of problem items, we dug into each one briefly to get an understanding of the scope of fixing them. Once everything was said and done, we had around 43 pages of notes documenting the various performance issues with Squad. That is a lot of problems with your game's code, and Patrick goes on to specify that they have been prioritizing and triaging certain issues. But at the end of the day, if you are concerned about whether or not optimization would be worse because it's now in UE5, well, that really doesn't matter. He says certain engine features UE5 introduced helps us in that being performance, but the engine itself isn't necessarily the problem. It's our code. We are being careful to not fully lean into some of the heavier systems that UE5 brings, at least without a solid plan in place. That said, we are experimenting with some UE5 features, such as utilizing Iris, but we're still in the early stages of testing this, as quite a bit of Squad's code has to change in order to make sure we don't colossally break things. He goes off to show off a bunch of examples, including removing the need to continually spawn audio components to play sounds in games, or perhaps lessons that they've learned from the physics engine tweaks based on the experiences from Starship Troopers Extermination. They're also utilizing chaos to build more performant vehicles, and deep diving into a quote-unquote tick audit to remove unnecessary and expensive behind-the-scenes checks that can cause performance issues. Now, I don't want to get too much into game dev, but a tick is essentially a set of processes that runs at set intervals in a game. But that tick will initiate certain amount of code that lets your player do something, that lets the environment do something, that lets the vehicles do something. Now, one example they brought up with this is that the game previously was, on every single time the game ticked, was trying to double check if your soldier has a shovel. Well, if your soldier is running around with his rifle, he obviously doesn't. This is the type of audit and fixing and rewriting code that the devs are doing, so now that tick to check if you have a shovel is never going to run unless your character physically swaps to his shovel. It's a lot of these smaller type changes that add up, and as the devs say, this is known as death by 1,000 cuts. This is a long way of saying that the devs seem to have officially moved on from indie developers to developers, I guess. And I don't mean to say that in a way to make indie devs feel bad, or even the original Squad devs who wrote this initial code feel bad. But what I mean is that the developers right now are prioritizing really important, albeit annoying, dev work, and they're taking the time to fully optimize the game in ways that you probably didn't even know existed, and honestly, they really don't have to if they didn't want to. It takes a lot to look at your game and say, yeah, our code sucks, but it worked, so whatever. But it takes a lot more to look at it and say, it sucks, but you know what? We're gonna take an entire year to fix it. If there's one thing I have to say about OWI and the dev team after all this, is that I would not have believed that they could have done this type of performance and optimization work even just a couple years ago. Part of me feels like the financial injection of microtransactions through weapon skins and emotes has been able to fund this level of intense back-end developer work. Hell, even in the devblog itself, they mentioned they're going to be reworking the Insurgent faction to refresh the weapon and player models in order to sell more weapon skins, stating that the models right now aren't at the current level of quality to support weapon skins. But is that a bad thing? At first I read that and I rolled my eyes and I said, come on guys, but when I think about it, yeah, the Insurgents look hilarious compared to every other faction in game. And if I'm being honest with myself, the skins so far seem very reasonable, and I know many people who have simply bought skin and emote packs just as a way to say thank you to the dev team. Now, if they're able to have continued development like we're seeing here and reworking the entire development of Squad from the ground up in UE5, I can't think of anything else to say other than it's worth it. If I'm wrong, tell me in the comments below. If you think I'm a shill, tell me in the comments below. But at times, I forget I have weapon skins and emotes equipped because they're just so not that important, or maybe better put, they don't affect so much of the game and they're not visually distracting that they just kind of fit inside the environment. Honestly, add more. If they're like this, do it, and maybe 5 years down the line, we can get Squad 2 with fully destructible environments in UE6. All right, enough of that. Moving on, in my previous UE5 Squad video, I also mentioned Nanite, and the devs have now confirmed that they will be using Nanite and virtual shadow maps in order to improve performance and visuals. As Zeno states, these two features are one of the most striking features of UE5 and will allow us to have much more flexibility in how we create our levels. For players, the visual changes will be noticeable as much higher quality of assets at distance, by both improving levels of detail, LODs, as well as letting us drastically increase draw distance. Virtual shadow maps will also do the same, but for shadows, where you before might have noticed a drastic decline in shadow quality at distance, as well as shadows disappearing for certain objects. VSM allows us to render very high quality shadows out to extreme distances, as well as sharper, more detailed shadows up close. If this image is kind of looking like the Office meme to you, basically you can have better looking shadows that are better performing as well. Left side is bad, right side is good. And they're also looking to implement dynamic time of day and randomized weather events. Although they're still testing this, so we're not sure if we'll actually be getting full-on night cycles or simply maybe a dusk-dawn type feel. It does appear we will no longer just have a rainy or sunny squad map layer. Instead, it will be dynamic, and you can even have things like this sandstorm appear mid-game. This is absolutely insane to see. Credit to the pilot who recorded this on the playtest, by the way. But as long as this doesn't last the entire game, I can see how this could be incredibly fun and add a huge element of replayability. We also got an even better look at the new Chaos engine for vehicle physics. This from Fuzzhead. Our engineering team has been working for a long time to ensure Chaos physics meets the needs of Squad and carries all the necessary features of PhysX, while purging the quirks that can sometimes make Squad vehicles behave in strange ways. Our engineers have been bringing as many parameters as possible into Chaos and adding new parameters to help designers create more robust vehicles. They have moved many of the variables that used to live on the blueprint before onto a vehicle config data asset. These variables include values for the engine, transmission, wheel setup, etc. Designers start with some baseline values loosely based on the UE4 physics values and then tune them accordingly. I am absolutely loving what I'm seeing. As a vehicle player, this is incredible. Vehicles are now able to traverse pretty much any object, and based on what Fuzzhead described with the new parameters included in the configs of each vehicle, they should actually begin to be even more representative of their real-life counterparts. If you're a vehicle player, UE5 should be revolutionary, and I need it now. This just looks way too good. But one thing we will have to wait for is anti-air weapons and more close air support helicopters. It is confirmed that AA and CAS will come in an update sometime after the initial migration to UE5, so manpads and additional CAS helicopters will be added at some point after launch. The devs also included this video, which shows a helicopter flaring out as it's tracked and locked by an anti-air weapon. The countermeasures work, the helicopter is untouched, and the missile flies and careens off screen or down into the ground. But the question still remains, what exactly are we going to be able to shoot? Shoulder-fired manpads will be available to most factions as part of a new soldier role. Other factions will forego the mobility of manpads and instead build fixed fob emplacements, which any player can fire powerful missiles from, similar to how emplaced ATGMs work now. Some factions will share launchers, but we will do our best to ensure there is a wide variety of launchers and variants so that every faction is using an authentic system. We also aim to include some unique pieces of hardware which don't play like the others, to introduce some interesting gameplay twists and faction asymmetry where it makes sense to. So what does that mean exactly? I would guess that we will be getting things like the Stinger and Igla, of course, but a fob emplacement to me seems something like maybe the Igla pod, which is essentially just two Iglas strapped to a chair. Or maybe we'll have the more conventional Swedish RBS-70. Some people have suggested larger things like having a Patriot missile system, but there's no way in my mind that we could reasonably have a Patriot missile battery on the front line on a squad map taking out close-range helicopters. The Iglapod or RBS-70 as emplacements would actually fit really well, as we already have things like the rocket pod emplacements for irregular militia. Either way, I cannot wait till we start getting some finalized images of both the handheld and the emplaced versions of these AA weapons. And with that, that's the update in the dev blog. There's a bit more in-depth technical discussion regarding quality assurance testing, performance, optimization, and all that type of stuff. So I have included a link to the dev blog down in the description below if you are interested in some light reading. But overall, I'm pleasantly surprised at how direct this dev blog was. These videos and images we see look great, there's no crazy over-promising of features, and I just finally feel like OWI is talking to us instead of trying to hide something. I have absolutely no frame of reference for when this transition to UE5 will be done, But at this rate, I would guess at the earliest mid next year or maybe late next year. If it was earlier, we'd probably already have announcements of upcoming public playtests, but we only have a month left of the year and nothing yet. But what do you guys think? Is this what you wanted to hear from the devs? Do you believe them when it comes to all the potential optimization fixes? You want to place a bet if Basrah will actually have more than 20 FPS? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you like the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. But that's it for me. Until next time, peace.